The Invisible Man is one of my favorite of Universal's classic horror films.
Here we go gathering nuts in May, nuts in May, nuts in May.
We'll say mix of tones, but that's why I like it. Director James Whale was back from his days with Frankenstein's monster to tell the story of another mad scientist, this time based on a novel by H.G. Wells. A dozen writers were brought in to try and crack an adaptation of the book before the screenplay by R.C. Sheriff was finally put into production. What worked about his script that didn't with the others? The Invisible Man is well known for its magnificent special effects and in-camera trickery. How were they pulled off in the early 1930s? Let's crack open the doctor's notes and reveal those secrets. A man dressed in a large overcoat travels through a harsh blizzard, finally reaching an inn called the Lion's Head in a small English village. Once he steps inside, the genial atmosphere completely shifts. He demands a room and immediately clashes with the innkeeper's wife, Mrs. Hall, refusing to remove the bandages that cover his face and sunglasses hiding his eyes. Meanwhile, in a town nearby, the mysterious figure's friends worry about his whereabouts. His colleagues, Dr. Cranley and Dr. Kemp, refer to the missing man as a Dr. Jack Griffin. Griffin's fiancée and Cranley's daughter, Flora, is sick with uncertainty. Soon enough, Griffin's lack of payment for his room and disrespect to Mrs. Hall leads to him being kicked out. In the middle of conducting important experiments, Jack becomes enraged, attacking Mr. Hall and drawing a crowd. A police officer arrives to check out the situation, but this sends Griffin off the deep end, and we're shown what he's been hiding. The doctor is completely invisible, his shape only perceptible when wearing clothes. He causes chaos in the village, escaping anyone trying to catch him. Back in Jack's lab, his friends discover he's been experimenting with an off-market drug called monocaine. It's derived from a flower that absorbs the color of anything it touches. The drug was animal tested at one point, resulting in a loss of pigmentation and madness. That night, Jack turns up at Kemp's home and explains his demented plan of holding the world hostage. He threatens Kemp with death and forces him to be an accomplice. Their first order of business is to return to the Lion's Head and retrieve Griffin's notes. H.G. Wells authored the Invisible Man book in 1897. Funnily enough, the same year Bram Stoker's Dracula novel debuted. After disapproving of the 1932 film Island of Lost Souls based on the writer's The Island of Dr. Moreau, Wells was reluctant to let another of his works be adapted for the screen. MGM had already passed on The Invisible Man, citing technical obstacles. Universal special effects guru John Fulton said he could create the special effects needed, and the production company purchased the rights to The Invisible Man on September 22, 1931 for $10,000. One of the provisions in the contract was Wells' script approval. Based on early drafts that strayed far from the novel, it seems that Universal only wanted the rights to The Invisible Man for the title and to slap Wells' name on it. It's unclear how they could have gotten away with changing the story so significantly while needing approval from the original author. Their strategy is still puzzling to film historians. At the same time the Wells book was purchased, Universal also scooped up The Murderer Invisible by Philip Wiley. Ideas from his work were incorporated into the discarded screenplays of The Invisible Man. They included an invisible octopus and invisible plague rats. While a mostly faithful adaptation to the Wells novel was eventually greenlit, some small elements of The Murderer Invisible still snuck their way into the finished product. 12 writers, including Garrett Fort, John L. Balderston, Richard Schayer, and H.G. Wells himself, submitted their takes on the material before one was finally accepted. Even James Whale, who ended up directing the picture, put together a 6-page treatment that was expanded upon, then rejected. Whale turned to collaborator R.C. Sheriff to see if he could crack the story. After reading some of the failed drafts, Sheriff took another look at the Wells book and was taken aback by just how far the passed-over screenplays veered from the author's original story. His script was much closer to the novel and was at last approved. While R.C. Sheriff's script adhered strongly to the H.G. Wells book, it did differ in some significant ways. One of the biggest deviations is the inclusion of the Flora character, Jack's fiancée. Her father, Dr. Cranley, is also a new addition. Dr. Kemp's role is greatly enhanced from his literary counterpart as well. The source of Griffin's invisibility isn't the same, as the drug monocaine was invented for the film. The process of the doctor disappearing from sight in the book is a longer, more intricate one involving light manipulation and other factors. 4 directors were slated to helm The Invisible Man at different times. It was a list that contained the names of Robert Florey and even James Whale before dropping out. What convinced Whale to confirm taking on the job was Universal's constant request for another Frankenstein movie. The director had no interest in it at the time and took on The Invisible Man in hopes of a different sci-fi horror film satisfying the executives. Ironically, Whale's new film featured a lot of the same basic components from his version of Frankenstein. Dr. Griffin was a wayward scientist who developed something the world wasn't ready for. He had a fiancée who was left alone while the scientist continued his experiments, and someone close to the doctor longed for the love of said fiancée. It seemed right up Whale's alley. The director was fond of working with certain actors multiple times. The cast of The Invisible Man showcased Gloria Stuart, E.E. Clive, and Una O'Connor, who fit that description. Dwight Frye also makes a short appearance as a reporter. In the end, he worked with Whale on 6 different films. James Whale also futilely tried to pull in Colin Clive to star as Jack Griffin after Boris Karloff exited the production. Karloff was the first choice and was intended to lead the flick until late into pre-production. The Great Depression and a lack of funds on Universal's part caused a contract issue. The actor had to walk away after an agreement could not be reached. The role went to Claude Rains in his first sound film, after James Whale recalled his special presence in stage productions. It was the actor's deep, commanding voice that really seemed to win him the part. Rains was brought in at virtually the last minute, as was William Harrigan, who played Dr. Kemp. Chester Morris was originally slated for the part, but dropped out after reading the script and not receiving top billing. Many aspects of The Invisible Man apparently came together late in the process. The most memorable attribute about this film is its impressive special effects. John P. Fulton was known as the Doctor on the Universal lot for his exceptional work. To make an Invisible Man believable to audiences, Fulton employed a technique called the traveling mat. The early incarnation of this method evolved at the Frank Williams Laboratory in Hollywood, where Fulton learned it. After most of the film was shot, the process began. A set covered in black velvet was used as the backdrop. The actor, sometimes Claude Rains but mostly a double, was clad in full black tights and a black helmet with air tubes to breathe through. While the actor had to work mostly blind and deaf, he was directed to perform the portions of the film featuring the Invisible Man partially clothed. It was a complicated process in those days, but the black velvet only left the clothes visible on film, and that was superimposed onto the already existing footage. The double exposure had to be precise, and the crew went through many takes to properly shoot the effect. Still, imperfections remained. Approximately 64,000 frames were retouched with a small brush and opaque dye. Whale used other more obvious tricks like fine wire or the marionette method to move around props on the main sets. Al Johnson and Bob Laszlo were in charge of these actions. Charlie Baker created miniatures for several bigger effects, including a very well-done train crash that was later integrated into other Universal projects. Music isn't used much, but that doesn't negatively affect the film this time around. Heinz Röhmheld provided a nice piece under the opening credits. After that, we hear music played here and there by characters within the story, but Röhmheld's score is missing completely until the last 7 minutes. When it does come back, it enhances the climax and ending. So in all, I'd say its minimal inclusion was utilized well. Jack goes on a rampage, killing a policeman and causing general panic. Radio reports are sent out to warn citizens and authorities about the Invisible Man. While Griffin sleeps, Kemp is able to call both Dr. Cranley and the cops to inform them of the situation. Jack and Flora are briefly reunited. The doctor's sanity seems to momentarily return to him as he explains how he tried to find a way to reverse the monocaine effects. However, the police surround the house and Griffin goes back on the run. But not before he promises to kill Kemp at 10 o'clock tomorrow night. Jack again evades his pursuers and begins a reign of terror on an even higher level. He throws people off ledges, derails a train, robs a bank, and more. The chief of detectives takes things very seriously and enacts a plan to catch the invisible menace while making sure Dr. Kemp is safe. The plan fails, and Jack keeps his word, murdering Kemp by tying him up inside his car and driving it off a cliff. Griffin then seeks refuge from another blizzard and is found sleeping in a farmer's barn. The police arrive, draw him out by burning the barn, and shoot him when they see footprints in the snow. Later, the doctor clings to life at a hospital and requests to see Flora. He gets his wish before perishing. In death, the Invisible Man is finally seen again as his face is revealed. The Invisible Man opened to box office success. It was received positively by critics and audiences who praised its special effects and mix of tones, along with Claude Rains' performance. A franchise grew from the film with 5 additional sequels. In 2020, writer-director Leigh Whannell came out with the popular reimagining starring Elizabeth Moss. It was a very different interpretation of the story than the 1933 film, but it's a masterclass in suspense that I really enjoyed. The voice of Claude Rains and the effects were the true stars of The Invisible Man, but the supporting cast was enjoyable enough. It was good to see Clarence in there. The best moments with these characters were the hijinks Griffin put them through, combined with the terror he instilled. Some of the characters from The Lion's Head were inspired by the residents of the town James Whale grew up in. One of my favorites is the police constable.
What's all this?
The one who sticks out most, though, is of course Mrs. Hall. This lady was screaming for almost her entire runtime. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's annoying, but it's always over the top, and James Whale encouraged those reactions. Una O'Connor became one of the more extraordinary parts of this movie. While she was the loudest, William Harrigan's Dr. Kemp provided plenty of emotional reactions too. We're meant to feel some sympathy for him, but there's definitely a strong trace of sleaze in that character. He hits on his friend's wife after the guy goes missing, and even has a picture of her in his house. His less than courageous interactions with Jack also portray him as a bit of a wimp. The character's death is equal parts humorous and unsettling. How Griffin stalks him and turns up when Kemp finally thinks he's free added to the main character's unpredictability. Jack painstakingly explains how his old friend will die right before it happens. But it is kind of funny hearing him berate Kemp in the moments prior.
I always said you were a dirty little coward. You're a dirty, sneaking little rat as well. Goodbye.
It's not always easy to blend tones in one story, but James Whale certainly excelled at it here. The Invisible Man himself is simultaneously threatening and hilarious. His madness drives the movie.
There's a souvenir for you. And one for you. Oh!
What is it? Something smacked my face.
Naughty boy.
That's the way the money goes. Top goes the weasel. Money, 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 money!
The first time we see this figure show up, through that tease of a see-through jaw, creates fantastic intrigue. The pacing is really strong as the movie evolves into an action thriller with the entire police force chasing Jack. His costume looks great as well. The trench coat, fedora, glasses, false nose, and wrapping around his face is perfect in that opener. You could see where Sam Raimi drew part of the inspiration for Darkman from. I can't say enough about John P. Fulton's effects. They still hold up for the most part. One I didn't mention earlier was the footprints in the snow. They dug a trench along the line where Jack was going to step and put artificial snow on top of a platform. Foot-shaped blocks of wood were dropped from the platform by pulling strings under the trench. It's a seamless in-camera effect that was fun to learn more about. Same for the ending shot with Claude Rains on a papier-mâché pillow in a stiffened bed made to look laid in even when no one was there. The more I see it, the more I admire The Invisible Man. Hearing all the behind-the-scenes info on the 4K Blu-ray release really deepened my appreciation for the craft applied here. I guess it could be a little clunky at times, but that's part of its charm. I had a blast with this one. Make sure you check out the Walter Culture YouTube channel for more content, and don't miss what's next on Juniversal. It'll be a howling good time. Oh, and Gloria Stuart played Old Rose in Titanic. Were you waiting for me to mention that?
It's been 84 years.